I played top lane for 30 days straight. This was a part of my unranked to masters on each role challenge, and I used to be a top lane main. Back in season 10 and 9 when I was a gold player, I started in top lane. That's why I played TRYND. So I thought, let's give it a run. Let's try to give it a shot. And initially when I started, I was playing champions that I play mid lane and then I play off-role top lane on my Grandmaster account. And it was a little bit too easy, so I decided to learn a new champion. And I decided to pick up the embodiment of top lane. We learned Garen. Now, learning Garen was shockingly hard. In Emerald, I had a negative win rate for like 50 games, right? Emerald is like below 1,000 LP where I'm on my main account. And if I was playing champions that I knew, if I was playing TRYND, I was 90% win rate. If I was playing Irelia, I was 70% win rate. But I picked Garen in Emerald and I cannot figure out how to win. And I just didn't think it was possible. So I made it a personal challenge to figure out how to carry on a new champion, Garen, on this challenge. And today I want to share with you some of the things I learned about top lane, some of the things I learned about climbing from top lane, and just some of my thoughts on the role. So the first big takeaway is that champion mastery is the #1 fundamental for climbing, right? This is something that I talk about all the time in mid lane, but it was really nice to get this idea reaffirmed from a separate role, because if I play TRYND, I know my limits, I know my matchups, and I just didn't lose in Emerald. I just mechanic checked people. I just out auto attacked them. I just out champion masteried them. But I play Garen, and I have never really played Garen for a substantial amount of games before. And now I don't know how to carry. I don't know how to beat people that, on my main account, like just there's a massive 2,000 LP between me and them. But on Garen, I just don't know my breakpoints, so I don't know how to beat them. So this isn't just mechanics, right? What goes into champion mastery, it's a lot of stuff. Now, of course, it is the mechanics, but for Garen, that's a very small part of it. There's not a lot of mechanics. And in fact, that was actually part of my issue. I went from playing champions that I could just out mechanic check the Emerald players. If I was playing Irelia, I just auto attack better than you. Even if I'm playing TRYND, especially with the range buff he got, I can just out auto attack you. I'm going to outspace you. But with Garen, I couldn't outspace anybody. I was really struggling, I was trying to get my autos and my Qs in, but you're just not outspacing people as Garen. But it also involves, you have to know the macro. You have to know, does your champion want a team fight? Do you want a side lane? Do you want a split push? Where do you have to be? You have to know the matchups, right? You got to know what waves are you strong? Can you contest wave 1? Do you have to give wave 1? You have to know your power breakpoints, right? Like a big part for Garen is level 11 when he gets his rank 2 ult. That's when he really starts executing people. His rank 1 ult is basically a regular ability, it's not even that powerful, but it's rank 2 ult. Now you're getting deleted from half health. So for me, learning Garen was tough, and Garen is really amorphous. He doesn't have a clear identity. So when I was learning Annie in mid lane, her identity is very simple. Every game, you move with your jungle, you kill people with your jungle, you peel for your ADC. And that is your game plan every single game. If you couldn't move with your jungle, it's because you messed up in lane somewhere and you have to fix that. If you can't peel for your ADC, it's because you're behind or you're positioning poorly and you have to fix that. On Garen, everything is relative on Garen. So some games you dominate lane and you have to be ahead and you have to snowball and stay ahead and just kind of make sure you never get behind or you lose. Some games you outscale and you have to wait for the mid game and you become a mid game champion. And Garen is very dependent on the rest of the game state. So he has a lot of different runes. He has a lot of different builds that completely match up with that, right? He has, the Grasp rune page. He has the Conqueror rune page. He has the Phase Rush rune page. What you take completely depends on who you're playing against and how the team wants to play, right? It's not just a 1v1 thing. How does this matchup go? It's also how does my team want to end the game? If my team needs to be like the snowbally team, I can't take Phase Rush. Because if I take Phase Rush and I have to concede early game and my top lane, my jungle gets invaded on the top side because, we both have really early game teams and I can't skirmish with him, game's just over, right? And that's my fault for taking a mid game rune and trying to play for the mid game. So the key to Garen is actually just understanding how the teams want to win and filling that role within your team with the proper rune page, the proper build, and the proper play style. So you have to kind of have multiple play styles available. For me specifically, the key was Grasp. I was trying to force Phase Rush every game, But when I learned that in fast-paced games, I can take grasp, and I was taking grasp like every other game because I like to play fast. Oh my goodness. My Garen win rate went from 30% to 70%, and we just shot up through Diamond and shot up through Emerald. But I still didn't take grasp every game, right? I just added it in where it was appropriate. So TLDR, champion mastery is key. You have to make sure you're playing a small amount of champions when you're trying to climb so that you can be attacking really what your champion is good at. Really, how do you play the mechanics? Really, how does your champion fit into your team? And it's going to be different for every game, right? Especially if you're playing a little bit more of a simple champion who has a little bit more complexity in the macro sense. You're going to have to spend a lot of energy figuring out what is my role, right? What do I do? How do I fit into my team? Not just how does my matchup go? Although that is part of it. There's a lot of parts that go into champion mastery. So start with champion mastery. Okay, so now I want to get into some differences between top lane and mid lane and top lane and the other roles. Top lane is a lot slower, but a lot more punishing than mid lane specifically. So top lane is built from a ton of just tiny little advantages, right? When the wave starts, you're going auto for auto, right? Just little auto for auto. You're going Q for Q, just tiny little trades that build up. You're going autos on the wave. You need to count how many times your opponent autoed the wave, because if you're up an auto attack or two on the wave, you now have created an offensive position for yourself, and you get to kind of set the pace for the lane. And that little 1 or 2 auto attacks, 2 waves down the road, 3 waves down the road, leads up to a giant crash that's impossible to stop. Just this absolute train of a wave that you're going to get dove on. And those tiny little details is something that doesn't really exist in mid. Mid is a lot more explosive, right? If I'm playing Tryndamere mid lane, or if I'm playing Garen mid lane even, I'm playing for an all-in. I don't care about the 1 auto attack I'm going to get hit on this wave. I don't care about what you're doing on this wave, because the wave states don't last that long. The wave, there's not as much space for the wave to play within, right? Freezes in mid lane only last a wave or 2 before either the wave gets kind of mucked up because it's in a weird spot, or your lane opponent just leaves, right? If you try to freeze on somebody mid, they're just going to roam bottom and kill your bot lane. If you freeze top lane, those can last actual minutes, like minutes upon minutes, 2, 3, 4 minutes of real time, which is just something that I never experienced in mid lane. One of my biggest issues with top lane is I would try to go for these explosive all-ins. But if you go for an explosive all-in and you lose it, your game is over. And that your enemy top lane is probably going to be able to carry. So top lane, you have to play for tiny advantages and play incredibly slow, because the second that you can lock in a tiny advantage and keep it, it will build into a massive advantage by itself. So you get push on a wave, and then you start to lead the trades, and then that builds into a big wave, and then that builds into a dive, and then the game's over now, right? And it all starts with leading on the wave by 1 or 2 auto attacks. So your positioning has to be very tight, and the tiny little details, the exact amount of autos on the wave, the exact amount of autos on the enemy matters a ton. So there are less all-ins, there are more autos for trades. Waves, not just freezes, but slow pushes as well, last way longer in top lane. In mid lane, you're crashing every second wave. In top lane, you're building up 3 or 4 waves at a time. So for my top laners out there, play a lot slower and get very precise with the minions that you're choosing to fight over, the auto attacks you're getting on the wave when you're trying to be offensive and defensive, and pay extra attention to when you're in an aggressive position. Don't overplay it, but posture in a way that you can pressure your opponent for as long as possible, right? The key to top lane is slow pushing, as slow as you can. Once you're up push just a little bit, you extend that slow push as long as you can by just last hitting at the last possible second as you can. That's super hard to overcome, because that's going to build into something massive given 3 minutes of good offensive posturing. Okay, so now I want to talk about top lane impact and the bad games that top lane has, right? Everybody wants to talk about how weak or strong their role is, or how fun or upsetting their role is to play. And top lane is a role that's interesting because you're so isolated. you're so by yourself, and League is a team game. So there are some games where your jungle is going to path away from you. The enemy jungle is going to path up. So you're going to be in a 1v2. And the rest of your team's still going to lose it. And you're so isolated, you can't like coin flip a fight. You can't coin flip an objective. You just have to sit there and be weak side and just lose. And your job is to lose as little as possible. And if you go even, that's like a very hard winning position for you. Because if you go even in a 1v2, obviously, right? That's good. But sometimes your team will still lose. And there's just nothing you can do about it. Those games suck. They are horrible. But on the flip side of that, if both the jungles path away and you guys are left to your own devices in the top lane and you can slow build an advantage, you will have more income than anybody else in the game, right? You're a solo lane, so you're getting solo experience. You also get more income than mid laners get, as mid laners get less gold on their waves, right? So you're going to have just the most XP, the most gold, and you're going to be the strongest player in the lobby, and it's not going to be close. So top lane definitely has individual games that feel horrible. But top lane also, I think, has the highest carry potential out of all of the roles. Bot lane, of course, there are 3 people there. So if the 3 people on the enemy team are all way stronger than you, right, it's hard to carry. But if the whole game is even and you can get really, really strong by your own individual skill set and you can individually gap your opponent, you can individually carry a heck of a lot easier than any of the other roles. So for me, top lane was kind of refreshing because in mid lane, it feels like there's always more you can do and there's always more you can try. But top lane, sometimes you just get weak-sided and you just lose. And it's really easy to identify that like, oh, I got weak-sided and my strong side lost. It's okay, right? It feels bad, but it's very easy to part with because you know that like, hey, that's just the nature of the role and there's very little you can do about it. Sucks to lose those games. In the games where you're not weak-sided or both the jungles path away, the whole game can be up to you and you can easily carry a very bad bot lane, especially as a split pusher like GAREN or TRYND or Yorick. These kinds of champions, they're a lot of fun to play in that isolated lane because you want to be isolated and you can carry. You can always end through a back door. You can always end. I had some crazy games over this challenge ending from, my team just being super far behind, but I'm able to pull 3-4 people to the side lane. I'm able to out-rotate them. I'm able to backdoor. They're on Baron. I'm able to break through that bot and hit him and just end the game. So just some crazy stuff you can do from the top lane role. It has incredibly high highs, and it does have low lows. Like the games where you're weak-sided and your strong side loses sucks. But it's easy to part with. It's easy to deal with. So I think top lane is a pretty impactful role in solo queue because over the course of 100 games, most of them you will be able to solo carry. And I think if you look at the top players on any solo queue ladder, you actually see in the top 10 on any region, you're going to have 2 or 3 top laners that are just 60% win rate, just dominating the server. And I think this is why, they 20 to 30% of their games, they might just lose because they're weak-sided and their strong side sucks. But every role has unfortunate losses. And in top lane, they were actually a lot easier to deal with for me than in mid lane. In mid lane, I have to deal with usually when I lose, it's because of a bad jungle support duo. Mid, jungle, and support I view as the holy trinity of macro decisions, right? So if you have a really strong mid, but a weak jungle and support, it feels impossible to get anything done. Or sometimes it only takes one of those links to break, right? If their team's playing well. In top lane, it is what it is, right? Anyways, these are my thoughts on the top lane challenge. I hope this was interesting to some of you guys. I hope maybe it was helpful to some of my top laners. Next, we're doing the jungle challenge. And of course, we're streaming that over on Twitch. So if you guys want to watch me play jungle from Unranked to Masters, check out twitch.tv/JSMethod. If you have any questions about top lane or GAREN, I would love to answer questions in the comments. Maybe I'll make a Q&A video if we get enough questions, or maybe a little bit of a GAREN guide. I will say for GAREN, I learned pretty much all of my stuff from Palco. He's a really high ELO GAREN player, and he has this really nice spreadsheet, and he's been streaming recently, so I watched a lot of his games live. Make sure you guys check him out. I appreciate you guys watching this video. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.